Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Now, you mentioned just now a leader that really helped you, but the question I've got for you is, who's your favorite leader and why? Now, this person could be alive or from history. Is it the same person you just talked about, or is there someone different?
No, the person I was speaking about, really, he was my first real mentor as such. But I think if I think about real strong leaders, there was a couple of leaders that I really look up to more than anything else. I suppose I'm a big fan of the natural world. And so David Attenborough to me is a great leader. I'm a big fan of the ocean, kind of a water sports fanatic, for example. When it comes to scuba diving, that's me. I love it. It's like my form of meditation when I'm scuba diving, for example. I know it sounds weird, Dennis, but it's true. But for me, so David Attenborough, he's such a natural leader. People are energized by his passion and enthusiasm without expectation. And he doesn't do it for money. He is not the most wealthiest guy in the world. But the reality is that his purpose in life, and the chap is he's in his 90s now. He's in his 90s. His career is all based around his purpose, which is all about preserving whether it be animals, mammals, and so forth. That's his embodiment. I really love that about him. And he's not ego driven. None of that. He's not driven by money. He just loves what he does.
And I love what you say, that he's a natural leader and he has the passion and enthusiasm without expectations. I love that. And yeah, it's really cool. Now, you said there's possibly two, so that was one. Is there a second one?
So there's another gentleman that I've taken it to a bit of a soft spot to, and vice versa, actually. And one of the other gentlemen that I've been following for quite a number of years is a guy called Marshall Goldsmith. And Marshall he's a New York Times bestselling author. He's been in probably the world of leadership and executive coaching for the best part of 50 years. So half a century or thereabouts. He's probably what I call the godfather of leadership, right? Or the godfather of most people in senior leadership or senior management roles have heard of Marshall. But effectively, I was introduced to Marshall actually through mutual contacts of mine that has taken years and years to nurture the relationship over time. And they introduced me to Marshall and we got on like a house like fire. I remember last year, actually, I was introduced to Marshall for the very first time and he came onto my podcast. And honestly, Dennis, it was such a laugh. It was such a laugh. It really was. Such a fun guy and such a humble guy. He's a humble gentleman is how I would really subscribe. And to me, he's just a really nice, down-to-earth guy and so knowledgeable and just so giving. And that's, again, another person. That's a great trait and a great strength that great leaders have.
Yeah, absolutely. Being humble, definitely. Tell me, have you met Sir David Attenborough?
I haven't, no. I'd love to, though.
Yeah. So, Adam, here's a question for you that I just thought of. And that is, if you and Sir David were sitting on a park bench having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, what would be a question you might ask him?
That's a really interesting question. I would probably ask him something on the lines of, do you feel like the work that you have done over the past 70 years, because I think that's what he's been doing in the last 70 odd years, do you feel like it's made a contribution and an impact to how people want to remember you once you've passed? I think that will be my good question.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's more about the impact he's making and also his legacy, right? And yeah, I think that's a very good question to ask. Yeah. Now, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. When I mentioned that title or that statement, what does that mean for you?
For me, leadership is consistently changing. It's consistently evolving, especially when we think about how technology is evolving, how business is evolving. Let's look at the last couple of years, for example, the way that leaders have changed in terms of their behavior from working from home, where a lot of us have been working from home. The way that our leadership styles have also changed. So we have to evolve our leadership styles based around the demands of people. What is it that people want and need? We still continue, depend on where you are in the world, of course, and where you're listening to this. It's going to depend on what the demands of people are and their culture. So first of all, because most people want to feel supported, human beings are very much social animals, Dennis. And if we're social animals, what is it that social animals need? They want to feel like they want to see a leader who is authentic and vulnerable. They can show that vulnerability. And I found that, especially prior to say 2020, I found that when we think of the word vulnerability, when we think of the word authenticity, leaders always saw it as a sign of weakness. But actually now what we're seeing as leaders have begun to see the impact of what the last couple of years has had on people's mental health is that they have parked their own egos and they park their own, their own egos to one side, and they've thought about others. And great leaders put others first before themselves. Really important. And so for me, that is a real game changer for me. What is it that people really want in this world? Number one, they want more compassion, right? Strong leaders show great compassion. They show understanding that actually, you know what? I understand you. I want to support you. I want to give you the tools and resources that empower you. That's what great leaders do now. Not everyone's going to step up to the game, but that's what the great leaders do in 2022 and beyond.
Awesome. Great leaders put others first before they put themselves. So I think that's a really good point to make. And I think Simon Sinek's actually written the book, Leaders Eat Last. And I think that's very similar to that as well. And I actually think it's spot on there and really good thoughts, some good analogy as well that you put with it. So thank you for sharing that. Who's your favorite leader and why?
So I have two. The first being John Wooden. And John Wooden was a legendary head basketball coach at UCLA. And I think he won 11 national championships, which when you think about, you've reached the top of your trade and you've done it 11 times, which substantiates that year in and year out, you are performing at a level of uncommon excellence. And how does the consistency of that occur? That was my interest in John Wooden. It's one thing and it's hard enough to achieve at that level one time, never mind 11. So I want to learn about John Wooden and how that occurs. And as I read his books, as I even watched, I can remember being a little boy, being enchanted by and so interested in John Wooden. When there was one game on a Saturday and not 1,000 during the week like there is now, and you couldn't wait for that one game to come on TV. And I'd sit there and watch John Wooden coach. And everything I read about John Wooden, Dennis, was his focus on people development, on integrity, on selflessness, on humility, on care, on a number of different things that he didn't go at that mediocre. He was extremely intentional to the point that he developed what's called the pyramid of success. And when you read what's in the pyramid, there's very little about basketball in that pyramid of success, Dennis. And is it a coincidence? Here's the thing, right? I'll share one other thing with you that I really want to try to integrate everywhere I go. When you read what's in the pyramid of success, it has very little to do with basketball because John Wooden, who was way ahead of his time, knew the power of personal development. He knew the power of some of those tenets I just talked about, and how powerful a unit would be if everyone was committed to those things, if everybody realized the importance of those things. John Wooden made it very clear that I recruited you to come here and play basketball, and basketball will play. But what you may not have had a total grasp on, although I may have talked about it in my recruiting, as a matter of fact, I made sure to talk about it. You're going to walk out of here prepared to be a successful contributor to the world as a person. And what I know is the byproduct of that is going to be success. And I talk to corporate leaders and I talk to head coaches and I say this. There's three basic human needs that we desire. One is love. The other is appreciation. And the third is inclusion. Those are the three most powerful needs. With love being the most powerful emotion known to humankind. And I asked the question to myself as a leader, if that is true, and I know it is, why are we not intentionally finding ways to integrate and build love within our culture? What are we afraid of? Well, why is love looked at in the athletic world, especially for boys or men's basketball? We're not going to sit around a campfire and start spreading love. And it's unfortunate that love is looked at that way. And even in the corporate world where we don't have the time for that. There's too much that needs to be done. There's too much work. But really, Dennis, it's just okay. If that is the most powerful emotion and it will fuel our people to do everything at a whole different level, why are we not intentionally finding ways to do that? See, I'm doing that. I've done that for a long time. And I know that it works. I know that it works. And it's not that complicated to do. It's not that complicated.
Yeah. It's not at all. No, not at all.
Yeah, Brené Brown was the second one. I love Brené Brown. What I love about Brené Brown is she challenges leaders to be brave, to be courageous, to be vulnerable, to have tough conversations, to really be in honesty and truth, to not be afraid to have disappointment occur and deal with it and talk about it and communicate about it, and as well as failure and a whole bunch of other things. I think Brené Brown brings in a education and a teachings and lessons around her writings that are current, that not only are they current, but they're also very valuable tools that are going to serve well in the future in respect to who you need to be as a leader. And so I'm always very interested in her writings and what she has to say. And I use a lot of her information and a lot of her teachings in my own programs.
Yeah, Petra, I'm just thinking about time that we've got together here. So I just want to ask you some other questions too. Leadership is changing. That title of the show, what does that mean for you?
I'll tell you, leadership for me is in the changing challenges. When you talk about artificial intelligence, when you talk about remote working, when you talk about technology in general, all of these things that are becoming very important, very prevalent in helping businesses be in the future and succeed in the future. I think as leaders, what we have to be very cognizant of is it's always about the relationships that are going to fuel us and prepare us to be successful going forward. And that as leaders, we can't get so lost in this technology that's coming out and this idea of remote working, which isn't going away. It's only going to be more demanding. And if we're going to keep talent, we need to make sure that we have that available. But the idea of this, let's not get lost in the old school principle that relationships are important and that somehow we need to take advantage of this technology. We need to take advantage of all those things. But at the same token, let's not lose sight of the core connections and relationships, which truly bring purpose to what people are doing. I think that's going to be a huge challenge and very important. I see it already today in remote workers.
Daniel, who's your favorite leader now? This person can be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
For me, it would be the current Sheikh and ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed. And the reason why I really like his leadership style is because he does have a big vision and it is mind-blowing. And if you've been to Dubai or you've seen a documentary on Dubai, it blows your mind. It's actually very hard to comprehend the level of success that they've created there. So in 2007, I was invited to Dubai to become the first professional athlete to go and train and coach wakeboarding. So I went over there. I had the ability to go on television, radio, all the media. So I was treated like a rock star. And I had the ability to coach locals. And I remember there was one local guy. He came down and he said, look, I want my daughter and son to learn how to wakeboard. But he looked at the boat they had and he said, that's not good enough. So the local sheikh, the small sheikh, went and bought a brand new boat worth about $120,000 just for his kids to ride on for about 3 days. But the scale is mind-blowing because where we were riding, the waterway was a man-made waterway. It was a 6-kilometre dogleg from the Arabian Gulf into the desert. And it was a man-made waterway, and it cost them $6 billion to make it. $6 billion. And the original reason why it was built was for the sheikh, the head sheikh, to bring his yacht down and park his yacht in there. So a $6 billion waterway. And that was given us to wakeboard on. So we're wakeboarding in the middle of the desert, and literally there is no difference between the sand dunes and the beach on the sand. It's just sand everywhere. And you've got this $6 billion waterway to play on. And so when I went there in 2007, that place was literally in the middle of nowhere. It was 100 kilometers from Abu Dhabi, 100 kilometers from Dubai. But then if you go back now, everything is built up between the airport and to exactly where I was working. And it's huge. They don't build towers. They build skyscrapers. They don't build a plane building. They build a building that is mind-blowing. That Burj Khalifa, you can be 100 kilometers out in the desert and you can see the tip of that thing. And it is huge. And everything is immaculate. They don't have a little budget. They have a huge budget. And they say, we don't want to be average. We want to be the best. And everything there that he's creating is the best. It's like an oasis in the middle of the desert. And it's growing. And there's no limitation to what they perceive as possible. So what we think is possible in the West, they laugh at that. And they say, over here in the Middle East, we're going to times that by 10. And they really blow your mind. And it's just constantly changing. It's exciting. It's dynamic. They're thought leaders, they're visionaries, and they're risk takers.
Absolutely. You can see it. And I watched a documentary the other day actually on Netflix about it and what they were doing. And it was like, wow. And I think there's 3 or 4 episodes into the series, I think it is. I haven't watched the others yet. I'm looking forward to it. But I think you're so right in what he's saying. But it's a big vision that he has. Have you actually met him personally?
I walked past him once. And I was in Emirates Towers and I was walking along and I saw the sheikh walking to me, and this has happened twice in my life and I've missed these opportunities twice. He was walking straight towards me and he didn't have anybody else around him. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the sheikh, but you can shock. And people would actually stop and talk to him and say hello. And he'd stop and talk to them. And I was too busy caught up in my mind going, oh my gosh, that's the sheikh, and kept walking. A time that had happened to me before, I was actually in London Heathrow, and a mate of mine was flying from Sydney to London, and I met him at the airport, and he called me and he said, I'm about to come through the airport. And so I said, good, I'm waiting at the gate for you. After about 60 minutes, my mate didn't show up, but this other guy walked through the gates, and he walked and he stopped about a meter in front of me, and he looked at me and he looked me up and down, and he looked at me up and down, he looked at me up and down, and he was waiting for me to say something to him. And I'm looking at this guy going, gee, you look familiar. Gee, you look familiar. And then he must have realized that I wasn't the person that he was looking for. And so he smiled and walked away. And as he got about 3 meters away, I said to myself, oh my gosh, that was Neo. I couldn't even say the word Keanu Reeves, but there he is in front of me. I just saw Neo from The Matrix. And then my mate rings me and he says, where are you? And I said, I'm waiting here at the airport. And he says, mate, he goes, I'm not going to be there for another 18 hours. I meant I was just stepping into Sydney Airport.
Oh,
so, yes, I've seen the sheikh. Yes, I've seen Neo, but I missed my opportunity both times.
if you were to sit on a bench in a park with the sheikh and you're having a coffee with him, would there be one question you would ask him?
Yeah, I'd ask him, what's not going to change about Dubai?
Nice question.
What's not going to change?
Yeah.
And I think the response would be is we are not going to stop breaking the boundaries. We will continue breaking the boundaries. We won't settle for second best. We have to be the biggest. We have to be the best. And also, I think what he'd say is, I won't settle on my people. Because as a visionary, he wants a world-class city for his people. So his vision is bigger than him. And it's also going to leave an impact on generations to come. And his father was the same. he's the same, and the things that his son are doing is exactly the same. So I think it would be what's not going to change about Dubai.
Yeah, nice question. Well done. Hey, the show here is called Leadership is Changing. When I say that, the title of the show or that statement, what does that mean to you?
For me, leadership is changing means that we're moving into a digital world, and these borders are opening up. However, because of things like COVID, our ability to travel is restricted. But I think through COVID, we've realized we don't have to be face to lead anymore. And I think people are looking at leadership very differently. And I think leadership is going to be very digital, meaning that people are going to follow us, and leadership is your ability to get followers. However, these followers we're probably never going to meet personally in our life.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to follow us online. I think they're going to read our books. I think they're going to come to our seminars. I think they're going to come to our coaching sessions. I think they're going to come to our team meetings. But we'll probably never meet these people in the flesh in the future. And especially with businesses like we run today, it's impossible to be omnipresent. This is the closest thing that we'll ever get. And that's what's going to change, in my opinion.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I see a lot, right? Where a lot of people are moving to in the coaching space, training space and all that, they're doing that. But also people working in businesses, and a lot of them don't know how to lead virtually, which is interesting. But I had a guy I actually interviewed on one of the episodes, and he talked about how do you lead someone that you've never met? And there's a lot of that right now whereby people have actually employed people the last 2 years, but they've never met them face to face. It's always been in a virtual, digital kind of sense. And I wonder if they don't like them once they meet them face to face, maybe. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see.
I think we have to meet people very fast today. And even if we just go back and have a think about selling has changed over the years. Many years ago, back in the 80s, you could go and knock on somebody's door. Hello, my name's Daniel. What do you do here? And you could sit down and have a 2-hour conversation. If you went and knocked on a door today, they would say, what the hell are you doing here? And if you ask them, what exactly do you do here? They would kick you out. Because with technology and the way the digital world is today, is you should be able to research at least 80 to 90% of these people or these companies online. You should be able to find out more information about these people than they know about themselves. And when you get into a sales conversation today, the sales conversation needs to take place within 20 minutes because people have this need for speed. Humans live by the expediency factor. Things have to move fast. And so you've got to be able to present in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to bring that back into understanding people. We don't have 3 or 4 or 5 hours to hang out on Zoom every day just to get to know one another. So we've got to figure out a way that we get to know this person intimately without them having to be on the call. And I think I've figured that out. What we use today is we use science and technology to understand people's behaviors. And we're moving away from what's called the golden rule, which is to treat others the way that you would like to be treated. And we're moving into what's called the platinum rule, which is to treat others how they want to be treated. But we've got to utilize science to discover exactly how to do that. So that's where I think it's going to have a big change.
The platinum rule, treat people the way that they want to be treated. Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, look, I'm aggressive. And you said that at the start. He's a competitive person.
Oh,
I'm aggressive.
Yep.
And so what happens is I want people to interact with me in a competitive way. I don't mind people who are aggressive. I like it. But I'll tell you what, when I've applied the golden rule and say, treat others the way I want to be treated, and I use aggression to push people forward, I get a lot of resistance.
I bet.
And it does not work. So we're going to go to the next level, which is the platinum rule.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.